right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the MBTA Task Force of Thursday, January 25th. It's moving after 6:30. And I'll take a roll call and I'll start with Sue Philbrick out in Zoom in.
Here.
Very good. Gar Morris.
Here.
Sandy Barber Turner.
Here.
Ann Harrison.
Here.
Sarah Melish. Denny Hall.
Here.
Richard Smith.
Here.
Is Michael Pratt.
My mic is on. That mic.
Yep, I'm here online. I'm on Zoom.
Okay, all right. And I'm Chris Olney and I'm the chair of the task force. Welcome, everybody. I'm sorry we're in room 7 tonight. We got bounced out of room 5 and so. There's Emily.
Yay, Emily, you made it.
Found a place to park.
Come on in.
So I was just apologizing for the change in room because of the public hearing at the Board of Health. And so we are cramped in here and the acoustics probably aren't very good. And I apologize for that, everyone, but
Are people okay if I turn the heat down a little bit? Oh, yeah.
please.
Where it is.
On the wall. Assuming I just can hit a button. But I wouldn't count on it. Probably dancing.
So the first item on the agenda is acknowledgement of receipt of correspondence. And Gail, what have we gotten? Gail there?
I think that we have some correspondence from Lorraine Iavani, and that's it for tonight, I believe.
I think we got one.
Kurt Rising.
And I recently received a letter from Mr. Bayer on Tappan Street, but I haven't read it yet. And I'll share it with everybody at the next meeting.
I would like to suggest that we respond to Mr. Rising. He raised some interesting points. For which we have explanations.
Okay,
And I missed what you were saying.
Mr. Rising, who may have, you sent his email around, Gail.
I did. You're right.
And he asks in part why we're not looking at more sites to the east of the railroad tracks. And I think we have partial explanation in that we are trying not to turn large lots that are currently single family into 15 units per acre, so as to reduce the number of new units that we're producing. And I think that's.
And also, I think we're aiming towards the smaller lots.
Yes.
Because it's more complicated for a developer to purchase up enough lots from single homeowners in order to create a tract large enough to build something that's financially feasible.
Yes, the objective is to control pretty tightly
Right.
any new development.
okay, I'll tell you what, I'll attempt a draft of a letter of response, which we can pick up at our next meeting. And by the way, if everyone has read the Cricket this evening, there's a letter in the Cricket on the
Yes.
same topic, which, so we might be able to.
That's a little.
No,
more
that was a
poignant.
different
Well,
topic.
well, this is,
That was not in my backyard.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps.
Can I jump in for a minute?
Yes,
So I think we did just respond to the letter.
oh, okay. Do you think that's sufficient?
I do,
In a public meeting, we don't need to write anything. You're right.
right.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay, everybody agree with that sentiment?
No, I don't agree. Because he's not on, he's not heard it.
Well, that, he can listen to the recording.
He can, but our goal is to, I think, answer and communicate with people who have serious concerns about our work. And we may have met the letter of the law by having discussed it here, but we did not effectively answer his question.
Well, and there were 3 questions. There
I
were
think
2
the same
others
thing, by the
besides
way,
the.
could be said
Mr.
about
D.
the activity on MBTS now. There are a lot of people there with a lot of things to say. I think we have very good answers to some of those things that are said. And at some point, it might be worth trying to communicate with those people because, you know, we've only got the tools we've got to talk to them and we ought to put it to use.
But rather than do individual letters, I would suggest that we list the questions with an answer and put them up on the website so everyone can see them.
Well, I think that would work fine. Why don't we try drafting something and bring it up to the next board meeting?
Because on the 40B, we had 700 letters from concerned citizens, and we did not do individual responses. We put everything up on the
So
website.
I agree that after 200, we should stop.
Well, it'll be next week.
Right.
Okay, moving on, an updated schedule. Well, our schedule got a little screwed up yet to this morning because the, communications subcommittee's meeting zoomed out, bombed out on Zoom. So we're rescheduling that for next Tuesday. We're waiting for the downtown improvement, committee group to schedule a meeting with the business owners, and the planning board thinks that a community forum is a great idea, but they're not sure about the date or the day of the week we should have it. They think maybe it should be during the week instead of on a Saturday, so we're gonna see if we can come up with a good time
Early March.
in early March to do that. So we'll adjust the schedule accordingly after we get those dates settled. But there's a bigger question I'd like to raise also, which is a longer range schedule. Because we have to get this into the state for a 90-day review before we can pick it up at town meeting. So if we start with town meetings, say a special town meeting in October or September.
Last year, we did at the beginning of November.
Well, that was, yeah, that's right, early, whatever.
That's the last time. The last time we can do a special town meeting is really the first week in November, so that any financial issues can get incorporated into that year's tax rate. Because they set the tax rate on December 1st, so.
Luckily, we don't have to worry about
No,
that.
but the special town meeting would. We
Special
can't have the special town meeting just for us.
Well, we can try.
No, but it's very expensive for the town.
Well, we'll cross that when we can. Well, the point of this is that 90 days before then is
Right.
early summer. Right?
Mhm.
So I think we have to be very aware of that date as we start planning events and forums and so forth.
So a mid-June, mid to mid-July kind of timeframe.
Something like that, yes.
I would aim for July 1st.
Okay, that's a compromise between me.
Yeah.
So why don't we just kind of make that date, and I'll put it into the schedule as a date by which we'd like to be able to submit a package to the state. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're done at that point, but
Right.
at least we have a goal to shoot for.
Well, let's ask Emily, what changes can we make? Well, that's a pre-approval, but what changes can we make after we've done that submission and be assured they'll pass?
As long as you're not making changes that affect what you affect the concerns that they have. Right? So, you know, if you're changing something to increase the unit capacity, that's probably not going to be an issue.
Yep.
If you're changing something to make development standards more restrictive, that probably will be an issue. So I think it will depend on them. You could, and I strongly suspect that there are a number of town meetings that are going to, or other towns that are going to town meeting without that 90-day review done, but with the late town meeting, I wouldn't recommend, in fact, I wouldn't recommend it for spring, but the timeline is the timeline. Definitely wouldn't recommend it for fall, so I think the sooner, within reason, obviously, you still have a public process, but the sooner you can get it to them for review, the better. But I think they're expecting that they're going to see it in draft form, so although they'd like it as final swap. Your other thing, because it affects the timeline, is if you do decide that you want to create a mixed use district and have that offset, you need to get the area, the geographic area of that district approved before you submit the zoning for approval, so something else to consider.
I think when you talk, you need to talk towards that
You
microphone.
probably do, that's a good point.
Gail has her hand.
Yes, that was
Yeah,
it.
yes.
Thank you.
Apologies, Gail.
Not a problem. It's a small room, and if you speak loudly and specifically to the microphone, we're good.
Okay, will do.
Thanks.
Just to be clear, a mixed-use district, you're meaning a mandatory mixed use or a mixed-use MBTA district?
A mandatory mixed use
Okay.
district. Yes, that is correct. Thank you for clarifying.
Could you clarify this idea of going to town meeting before approval? Is that doesn't make any sense to me.
I agree.
Not in this
That's
town.
what I'm saying.
Not in this town.
You asked before we go for the 90-day approval, when we were gonna show this to the town.
So I think we're working backwards, right? I would expect that we would show it to the town.
Before we submit it, of course.
And what would that date be?
Well, I don't know, a month before?
What do you mean by submitting it to the town?
I think we should let our taxpayers and voters see what we're submitting to the state
Well.
as a draft.
So.
And I think we should give them a chance.
Gar, the way this works is we're submitting this to the planning board with our
Okay,
recommendation.
all right, well.
Then the
hold
planning
that
board's
in.
gonna have public hearings about the changes to the zoning, and there'll be community forums and so forth. Planning board may change, will change what we propose,
Right,
and then that all has to be done by around the 1st of July.
so when would you think we would give the planning board
So it looks like
this stuff?
it's not gonna be a handoff, I don't think, but I think we have to start engaging with the planning board sooner rather than later to start making this.
Sooner being May 1st,
Well, we,
No, sooner.
no, sooner,
April 1st.
I would say by March, we should be doing some
I'm
serious.
just trying to get.
Gar, one of the
What we're
things-
doing here.
One of the things you have to understand is the planning board now has a CST application before them.
That means,
Takes a lot of time.
Still signaling special
okay,
permit.
thank you, yeah.
It's just it's a
But-
timing issue,
So
so.
they're not gonna be available.
Well, they're gonna be busy.
It's gonna be busy, but we will be available.
So.
But we can't expect to dump everything on them at the last minute and
Right.
expect a speedy result.
Okay, so I don't mean to be a
No, it's-
difficult here, but I'm just saying, okay, when do we have to give this stuff to the planning board?
again, I don't think there's a handoff date where we just dump this on the planning board paper. No, we're gonna have to start engaging with them and discussing what we think might be the new zoning, and then have a discussion with them about what districts, what are the rules gonna be? What, we're gonna have design guidelines, which I'm sure we will. What are those design guidelines gonna look like? All of this has to happen over the next couple of months.
When is our meeting with the planning board? Don't we have a schedule?
So we have the forum where we're gonna talk about zoning in general
Mhm.
in early March, a month from now.
So that's interesting, Chris. Are you supposing that we will go to the planning board with specific alternate plans or with a smorgasbord?
I don't know. We have to decide that, but that's a good question. Maybe we should be asking the planning board whether they prefer a smorgasbord to a bunch of options.
I would urge us to go with alternative plans, because I think we are going to be spending a lot of time talking about the interdependencies of these choices and the overall effects of these choices. And they can always pick them apart.
Of course.
But I think we ought to give them our best shot.
I have another suggestion, instead of giving them a smorgasbord, is to have all the alternates we've looked at and explain why we think certain ones are the best and why we think others
Well,
may not be, because you can't expect people to deal with this in a void, and we spend a lot of time on it, and they need to understand what our thought
Well,
process
it'd be
is.
nice-
that is partly my point, but these come in sets. I mean,
Yes.
the point is that they come in sets. You don't want 40 acres or 45 acres, you want exactly the right. number.
39.
So that makes it difficult to come up with something that isn't a finished product, if you will.
Well, it may be that one of the alternatives turns out to be 55 acres for various reasons, which then the planning board can think about. Maybe we prefer that to the 39 acre one, because, for whatever reason.
Can we just, when going to the planning board, I think, I agree with Sarah. We can give them more alternatives than we think, than we need. But we need to give them our thinking on why we recommend a certain set.
Oh, nobody,
And,
Yes.
and,
Certainly.
yeah,
and certainly we don't want to give them everything that we have looked at.
oh, gosh, no.
Because there are some things that are just gonna take up time in a meeting and not get anywhere.
But to present them with, say, 3 or 4 sets of options, or
Well,
maybe
probably
a
not that
4.
many.
Well, we see, I mean,
Well, I think your planning board's not gonna have very much time, because actually in looking at the dates, you're probably gonna have to have this submitted to the state by the 15th of June. So if you back off from November 1st, you need about minimum of 6 weeks from September 15th to submit the actual article to the select board. And for it to come back to the planning board, post hearings, hold 2 hearings with no problems, no mistakes by the newspaper or anything else. Be able to get it, the hearings just before town meeting, like, within a week. So, and so that's really tight. It's about 90 days back in June 15th.
I agree with you, but I think there can be overlap. I don't think we have to wait to get the state's approval to start. Doing
I don't
advertising
know
and
that,
things.
that's why Emily's here to recommend that or not.
I like the way you're thinking though, from taking the date of town meeting and working in all of the requirements for how the town gets the information to town meeting members, because that's important. So funny, here we are in Massachusetts, and every single town has how they open and close their warrant and when they have the public hearings differently, so I like to start that conversation early. You'd be surprised, there's the ones that the article has to be in the warrant perfectly, and then the hearings can happen, they're the ones where the hearings can happen, and it's based on a placeholder in the warrant, there's the one where the hearings happen, and then the warrant's open, yeah, it's complex.
And we have, the article is one thing and the motion is another.
Right.
So we can have an article as long as it covers the 4 corners. And then a motion which is more specific.
Okay, so then this is, that's another and useful variation, so. Yes, I think we need to understand that process, or I need to understand that process deadline. But you should be looking very much towards getting something, I would say to HLC about. June 15th isn't a bad date to be working with right now, so then working back from that. Who needs to have had input into that draft before it goes to HLC? Are you talking about the geography of the districts at the same time that you're talking about the zoning with the public, the actual text? Are you talking about the geography first and then the text, and how are we having those conversations? So and again, different communities are doing it differently, but if we start with that target date of June 15th to submit draft geography and text to HLC, then I think we need to work back and talk about who are the decision makers for that draft. And how do we involve the public in those conversations between now and then?
I have a question for Anne.
Yes.
I feel fairly clear, I think, about the planning board's role in all this, but I don't understand the select board's role.
They put the items on the warrant.
But in terms of being involved with the back and forth and the geography and the text.
I think they're gonna want select board approval.
If you want the select board to say that we approve this, you probably better present it to them.
Thank you.
I mean,
Okay, so in the
they have to
mix-
make a recommendation on town meeting floor. They can't really make a recommendation if it hasn't been presented to them.
Right.
We can, but it's not likely to be what you want.
There'll be no position.
No.
Well, I tell you what, I have an idea. I think we should ask our town planner to put together a schedule on this.
Yeah.
Let him learn about how to put a warrant.
Yes.
Okay, I'll get you the fair shirt, Mark.
Yeah.
Hey, but listen, however you cut it,
We're in trouble.
we gotta have
We
to
gotta
put
work.
together a submittal for the planning board sometime in March and April.
Yeah.
And maybe March, so we have literally 2 months.
That's right.
And I don't know that we can get that done in a meeting a week.
Right.
It's a meeting every other week.
And we may want to show this to the town at some point. This, who knows, the voters might want to see.
Well, I think things will be
That'll
posted
be-
on the,
yeah.
we'll be letting the town know as we go along.
But as much as blasting it from the.
Well, we better get our proverbial rear end in gear because we don't have a hell of a lot of time.
Mhm.
And I don't think you're gonna get it done in a meeting every other week or even a meeting a week. I think it's like a war room we're talking about.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
we may need to go back to the kind of work that we did when we selected these areas to begin with.
I do have a presentation to show you. too.
Okay,
When we
okay.
get to that point,
Okay.
It might help some of this conversation.
That's a good segue. Let's get to it.
I'm actually in the waiting room for the Zoom, at least I hope I'm in the right Zoom, but.
You in.
If you-
A bunch of folks did get here, which they should not due to the
Yeah,
communications thing, so hopefully.
I clicked on the link on the,
On the
Did you
agenda.
do the,
on the
was
agenda.
it this, for the task force tonight, not.
Yeah.
But I not the one this morning.
You have to, you're not logged into Zoom.
That's what I'm saying, is I'm not.
It's not
I'm
working.
She's trying to do it. but
I'm gonna
it's
go
not.
back and double check and make sure, to your point. that I don't log
There were a
in.
few meetings today, that's why I could have.
There were a
You
lot.
need the meeting ID? I have it right here.
Let me just make sure I've got this one. Oh, no, you're right, I logged into this morning.
Yeah.
Which
No one else could get
was
into it.
troublesome as it was.
It's been one of those days, trust us.
Yes.
One and not number two. Okay.
And then you might need me to give you, will you need me to assign?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You have to do it from here.
No, I think it was just because, yes. there was
Here you
that
are.
stream.
Yes.
And you don't have, there you are, okay.
Here she is.
Bated breath. I do have printouts. I will say that the text is really, really, really small. So I figured you could just use it as an aid memoir for the presentation. I also give my glasses. And then I will obviously give you the PowerPoint presentation. We were working right up to the last minute of them. So. And I also have some questions into into HLC that may change some of my thoughts.
Just really.
Yes, I know. Off the printer that said, they're not going to like.
There is an icon that.
Oh, here's words for where.
Yeah, my apologies, it was a lot bigger.
Oh, the compliance requirements seem to have snapped back to
37.
to
I pulled
37.
them off the website this morning, or this
So they
afternoon.
changed. They're
They
back to
changed
what
back.
the paper print was.
Oh, well, that's good. Hey.
There's always something.
Yeah, well, but that's in a good direction.
All right, excellent. You should be able to see that. I'm going to turn so the microphone can pick me up. So you gave us quite a few assignments last time, which we were happy to do. So I think I've captured all of them. I did bring the big map in case we had questions about boundaries and we could draw on them. But I'm hoping everybody can see. So as I said, I picked the 559 units, and 37 acres up from the website this afternoon. And just to make it easier for us to see, I actually calculated out what 40% would be for both the area and the percentage, so we can jump back and forth. And I do have this at both the beginning and the end of the presentation. So we have redrawn the districts as we talked about. So the general district is outlined for reasons that will become clear when we talk about, but you see that A1 is the orange, the 1B, the 1C. I think that one had one of the modifications in it. 1D is what we saw last time. Then the G1 district, which we drew out last time, and the D district. So we're just going to talk about within the station area for the moment. So what I've done here is I've shown you that we're modeling it under the existing zoning. So we have at the top, I'm just going to use this slide to explain what we're seeing. So we have the actual existing zoning, the district acreage for the district that we're testing, the density denominator, so that removes the excluded land if there is any. If there are acres within the station area, we see those acres. And in this case, there's no unit capacity because there's a restriction of 2 units per lot in the D2 residence district. You'll see I've removed that restriction for a model. I've also put the existing zoning parameters in here. So just the key components that go into the compliance model. And then how many parcels are in the district, how many of them are non-conforming based on current district. And then because what I did for a couple of these where there were zoning restrictions on them, I took that restriction off. So in this case, you're seeing what would happen if you took off the 2 units per acre and just let it be whatever it is. I'm not, by the way, saying that's the right thing to do here. I just wanted to see what the capacity would look like. Yep. So this format, you're going to see this same format all the way through, and we can jump back to any one of the slides. 1B, so that's a green area here, also D2, also removed the two units per parcel from that restriction, just what that would look like. 1C, we had changed the outline of this district a little bit. It's in the G general district. So you see the capacity modeled up here according to the model, and again, the same zoning parameters for the G district. 1D, same thing, general district, final unit capacity, dwelling units per acre. Then we did the G1, which is the district that we drew last time. Also in the general district, same sort of thing, unit capacity per district, and dwelling units per acre. D, which we did last time. Now, this is interesting. So you had asked us to look at modeling what would happen if there was a mandatory mixed use district. And so we looked at 2 districts just for purposes of comparison. Again, not saying that they should change, but what it would mean. So the unit capacity of the mandatory mixed use development would be capped at 25% of the required unit capacity, which would be 146, I think, of what you have. The D model, if you just say, hey, you know what, we're not going to make this a multifamily district, an MBTA multifamily district, we're going to make it a unit mandatory mixed use district. You would get a unit capacity of 52 underneath the current zoning, and therefore you would be able to offset the total unit capacity requirements by the 52 in the D district. Now you're going to see another option later on, but I just wanted to show you what that would look like.
And that would allow us to have less density elsewhere.
Exactly, absolutely. So then now we're going to go out of the station area and look at some of the options here. And we had taken off some of the ones that we looked at earlier. We had created this A and A1, we'll zoom in on them. And then I took the 2 parcels that belong to Gordon College, and you'll see what I did with them when we get there. But I'm not modeling all of that. So here's that A district we looked at, which were these 3, I think it's 3 parcels in here. Yeah, 3 parcels down there. It's a limited commercial district now. It obviously didn't have a parking spaces per dwelling unit in it because it doesn't allow dwelling units. So I just added that, kept the dimensional standards the same. And this is what you get for a final unit capacity per district. And I should say, because I'm sure people are going to look at this and say, oh my gosh, there's 443 potential units there. There are other controls that we can put on this. That's part of the conversation. And in fact, I think I modeled one of them elsewhere. I can't remember if I put it on the spreadsheet or not, because I did a couple of other tests. So these are for purposes of comparison. There are other things we can do here. A1 is just the green area there, and you see same zoning, obviously. This is what, and again, I added the 1.5 spaces, and I chose 1.5 because that seemed to be the one for everybody else, so yeah, exactly. And then Gordon College, so you'll see the district acreage is crossed out. As you know from our previous conversations, you can take excluded land, and there is a column in the model that allows you to override that excluded land, so you can test it. So I overrode it and I said, we're gonna take 20 acres and see what happens here. And so again, this is an exercise now. I put in some random pieces in here, mostly based on what you already had. I did bump up the parking spaces per dwelling unit to 2, just because it's further away from some of the other things. I did put a lot area per dwelling unit restriction on here, because if you don't have that, it gets to be a very large number. It already is a very large number, because it's a lot of land without a lot of restrictions on it. So, but it gives you an idea. So we also modeled the mandatory mixed use on the entire G district, because we were being ambitious. And if you removed all of the controls, modeled it as it was, you would get something like 672 units. Obviously, we don't want to do that based on everything that we've been talking about, but it lets you know that you can hit that maximum 146 unit offset, which is really what we wanted to know. But note that the dwelling units per acre is low. So you get to a 2, and that doesn't really matter because it's a mandatory mixed use, but it's just interesting to note that even if you did use the entire general district and model it, there's so much land that your dwelling units per acre would be quite low. And you're going to see this theme crop up a couple of times. We also did the really interesting exercise of modeling all of the buildings that could become 3 units as of right. And this was fun to do. It is a mathematical exercise. We basically tossed out anything under 3 units and anything over 3 units, and you would get a unit capacity of 147 units. Based on turning all of the existing buildings that could be turned into 3 units only. There's a couple of other ways we can model it, but let's go for it for now. But you get a very low unit.
Is that non-conforming buildings as well as conforming?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's what the bylaw is.
Yeah.
Because you're building 3 units in an existing structure, it doesn't matter whether you're a conforming or a non-conforming lot, because you're not changing the footprint.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're in the setbacks or anything.
And it occurred to me, I chose one method of doing it. There's a couple of others that might get to a higher unit, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough to offset that low density.
Yeah.
So again, that was one way of testing it. So then I thought, what happens if you start to mix and match, right? If you have, start putting all of these districts together, or clusters of these districts together, what does it start to look like? This is what took me so long this afternoon. So, do we get close under the existing zoning, the dimensional standards, knowing of course that you still have to make tweaks because it's not allowed as of right. So I combined all of the options within the station area. So 1A, B, C, D, 1D, D, and then G1, all of them together. You, of course, because this is a lot, meet the acreage within the station area requirement. That's that green check there for the totals. You, of course, meet the final unit capacity per district. You're not meeting the density. So then if you remember up here up top, 1A and 1B are doing 0 unit capacity. So I put those in, and those are both above 15 dwelling units per acre. So it brings our density up, but not quite enough yet. So, and again, this is just under the existing dimensional standards.
1C is pretty close too.
1C is pretty close as well. So you're anticipating, which is great, because the first thing I did was remove D, and it's because D had the lowest, not counting sort of the 1-D and 1-D were the lowest. So I took D out first, and the reason I took it out first is because I think based on the conversations we've been having, that it's potentially a candidate for the mandatory mixed use district, or it and some other component.
Which one is D again?
D is the red one down here at
Ah,
the bottom.
Can
Yeah.
I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Were you using the recommended areas that our zoning committee provided to you, or we're just using the zoning districts?
I'm using the zoning districts modeled on the recommended areas, sorry.
Okay.
The
You
recommended
used our
areas,
recommended areas.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
But,
But with those current zoning dimensional standards for each area.
and so we had areas delineated that crossed various zones.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And I think she separated those out.
Yes, I had to,
Wow.
yeah.
That's why it's a 1A, 1B,
Okay.
1C.
Right,
Because
yeah.
those are different
So
zones.
these are working ideas.
Absolutely,
They're
absolutely.
not just pie in the sky or something.
No, you don't work it.
They're working on-
Either Emily knocked herself out this afternoon to get the charts done.
Actually, I have to give a lot of credit to one of my colleagues, Jimmy, who is our GIS specialist. So he was he was doing all of the mapping. He put most of the tables together for the existing districts. And then I went in this afternoon and started playing with them and said, what happens if I do X, Y, Z? So team effort on this. But yes, all of these are based on the districts you gave me
Okay.
and the town's current zoning for each district, including if we had to split it up.
When you say the town's current zoning, are you referring to the setbacks?
All of the dimensional standards in the zoning, so, minimum lot size,
Covered.
Building
height, etc. Setbacks actually don't feed into the model. We asked for them in the model.
Coverage by structures.
Yeah, lot
Right.
coverage.
But
But the
Open
big
space
change
and
that you're
coverage.
making is that you're saying that any lot can now be a three-family, but doesn't necessarily have to be on the same footprint.
No, for these,
It has
it's
to
not
be
a
a-
3-family, it's multifamily.
Yeah, okay,
Yes,
I understand,
yes,
but you
yes.
removed
I've
that.
removed,
Yeah,
yes,
okay, got it.
yes, absolutely.
You kept the 2.5 stories?
I kept the 2.5 stories. So, which is why you're going to see there's some room for discussion here. So now I've taken out D. D is gone from multifamily consideration in this scenario. You see our density pops up to 12.82, so we're getting closer. You also see that 1-D is quite low in density, so it's really pulling us down.
What's 1-D again?
1-D is that little red spot up here, that little magenta.
That's where,
The cricket.
Yes,
No, 1-D is Powder House Lane.
yeah, that
it's
doesn't.
your magenta up there. Yeah,
Oh, Elm Street.
No, but Powder House Lane.
Clubhouse Lane.
Yeah.
So it's a
Powder House Lane specifically, which is sort of wild, because it's,
but remember, it's the
Really is.
zoning, not necessarily
Right,
what's
what's
there.
there.
So, yeah, absolutely.
that's.
So then I took out 1-D.
Now we're inching up.
You're inching up to 3.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe we ought to think seriously about changing
zoning
what
for
the
that.
zoning for 1-D.
exactly.
Exactly.
You don't like it because it's large, but
It's in a good
Yeah,
area.
it's in a good area.
Yeah.
And it's existing.
That is.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting increasing density there to 20, for
Yes.
example?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that is certainly a strategy that communities are using, is they're saying, makes sense where it is. Let's zone it for what it is, and
Right.
yes, exactly, so
Yeah.
absolutely a possibility, as I said, I wanted to stick with, for showing you the comparisons. I
Yeah.
wanted to stick with the existing zoning, but absolutely a possibility to do that.
So if I understand this right, A, B, and C satisfy the requirements.
C is actually a little bit low on the density, it's
The
only
average, yeah.
14.8, it's close enough, yeah.
So A, B, and C together would meet the requirements
For a
inside the
portion of
zone.
it. No, we've got G1 is in this as well.
I understand, but if you had
take
only
out
A, B, and
G1.
C,
Yeah.
But if you only
Yeah.
take
A, B, and
those
C
three,
alone
Yeah.
is one possible
Mhm,
solution.
absolutely,
then
absolutely.
you'd wind up with a total of what, almost 300 units?
That's right, and 1A, the density of 1A would help to offset the lower part of 1C, absolutely. And you'll see, I'll show you another one, another couple in a minute. So then I looked outside the station area, so that's A1, and Gordon College. None of them meet that 60% alone, but you know what, you can do more than 40% in the station area, so that part doesn't really matter. They all contribute significantly, especially Gordon College, because there's not very many restrictions on that at the moment. And they all bump up the density of the dwelling units per acre. So, you know, again, if you went a little bit less dense within the station area, you could average up with these if you wanted to. You don't have to offset that. And then I said, well, what happens if you do like one path? What's one path to compliance that has some stuff within the station area and some stuff without? That's sort of the idea of geographic distribution. And so again, just putting these in here, because there's an infinite number of almost infinite number of scenarios we could run, keeping the 1A, 1B, 1C, G1, adding A. What's that total look like? You get 28.4, yeah, bingo, I mean, bingo, it's one option, it's not the only option. It is higher on the unit capacity than you need to be. It's a little bit higher on the density than you need to be, but it shows that there's one way of putting these together to see how it looks.
And it's
Can we-
and it's a lot higher inside the circle. than it used to be.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
again, you
Which
can.
is a good thing. So let me be sure I understand here. What's the total number of acres in that? So total number of acres is 49?
Is 5349.5 with the district density, yeah.
Okay.
So you in the, out in the LCD,
Yeah,
we had 2 parcels.
we did, A is both parcels,
Okay,
yeah. Now you
so
could,
that's Family Medical and the
Yes.
MAC.
yeah, and you could with
Okay.
A1, because you're over the number of parcels you need, you could drop it down to just a single A1 parcel. Again, I didn't want to give you an infinite number of things.
Right, yeah.
To
No,
have
but
to
you
look
do-
at, but there's plenty to talk about,
Yeah.
so,
But if you do that, you'd be in pretty good shape still.
Yeah. I think you would
If you
be.
did just the 1A.
And then let me just see, yeah. I
One
didn't
point of
put
view,
this
the
again.
other point of view is that why do you want to have more than 15 acres
You
inside the
you
circle?
don't,
Right.
and you don't.
So if you got rid of G1, do you still qualify?
I can pull that up, can I pull it up without stopping the share, let me see. The only thing I was doing was loading some spreadsheets on here. Yes, shopping the stairs, stopping the share, okay. So I take.
The 1A includes the
The 200
Newport Park.
Well, that's another one
Take
of the
out-
zoning ones.
You want to take out G1?
1A is Newport Park.
All right, so if you take out
1B is
G1,
along Pine Street.
224 within the circle is the requirement, right?
yes.
And then 14.8 acres within the circle, because that's,
So if you take out G1,
Yeah,
you get 18 acres within the circle. And you get, yeah, let me just add that, which would be easier if I didn't go around putting a typo in there. You would have 331 units within the within your circle, within your station area.
again, is more than we need.
And you would have 19.6 density.
We could
overall.
lower that.
You could, because the A contributes to that density, and right now, the way that A is modeled, it's 443 units, and you would probably want that. Now, let me just swap out A for A1,
Let's
and
see.
I can tell you what that looks like. So if we did A for A1, you would have same thing for the station area, obviously that doesn't change, and you'd have a total density of 17.41. So.
So you'd make it for the density.
You would make it.
And also-
and that's a better piece. That's the Family Medical Associates, whereas the others is the MAC.
And you would have 355 units total, so.
Wow.
355.
I'm sorry, no, hold on to that. Hold on to that thought.
What we need is 559.
Yeah, I know, I grabbed one of the cells incorrectly.
That's very interesting.
614 overall, still the 19 on the dwelling, that came through okay, so 19 on density, 614, 18 acres within the station area.
Okay, and that's again, please tell, say it's 1A, 1B, 1C, and A1,
And A1
and not G1.
and not G1, correct.
And I think, Emily, as you pointed out, there are other controls here, so we can actually draw that density down with those areas.
Mhm.
To
Absolutely.
exactly the cutoff.
What we want.
Well, especially A1 because it's a single parcel, it's,
Yeah.
you know, I just sort of slapped something on there because it was the existing zoning, the dimensional standards should definitely be reconsidered for how that parcel would be developed as a multifamily, absolutely. We had also talked about with 1A, 1B, 1C, because this doesn't even include 1D, is whether or not you wanted to vary the density in those 3 sub areas or not. So again, there's that possibility.
Is there a problem with 1A, which straddles the circle?
No, because the model calculates the area within the circle precisely based on the GIS. So you don't have to worry that if some's in and some is out, it's throwing off the calculation. So it's calculating that appropriately.
So it's only using the area that's within the circle.
Exactly.
So there's a little bit of area on 1A that is outside the circle,
Yes.
which we're not seeing here.
So I have
But you've got it.
I have a question about 1A.
Yeah.
So that, most of that land is encumbered by a deed restriction for senior housing.
But the overlay, the deed restriction, now that could be an interesting, I don't think I realized it was a deed restriction.
It's.
I knew it was
public-
senior housing.
It's
yeah,
public
yeah,
housing.
yeah.
But is it deed restricted? Not necessarily.
I think it is. I think, I guess we
You'd
can
want
check.
that.
I don't know.
You would definitely want,
Do you think that would knock it out?
yes.
It would be just, even though it's a state deed restriction.
I think if there's a deed restriction, because remember 3A, you can't have it be age restricted. Now that's the zoning, but
But
if you're
it,
doing it,
but it's allowed to be deed restricted.
I would want to check that with.
I mean, it's allowed to
HMC.
be multifamily housing, which
Right,
it is.
but it's deed restricted by age.
Yeah,
That's
but the
not.
plan
part of
was to
3A.
add housing that wasn't necessarily senior
Well, the
housing.
state would have to approve that. Unfortunately.
I think you would want to check that very carefully before you went too far down that.
Okay, so the nature, let me be sure I understand that what you believe to be the nature of the deed restriction is that it is restricted by age. The units are restricted by age,
Is
not
it
by
a-
income.
age or disability?
Yeah, because you got disability too.
Well,
I think disability shouldn't be the issue, but
Right.
age restricted is because it's supposed to be suitable for families, so. If there's an age restriction that prevents,
and if there was another parcel associated with it that was not deed restricted, does that make any difference?
Well, it looks like we don't really need very much out of 1A anyway, because B and C add up to more than 15 acres. And
just take 1A out. 1A has the density though.
Yeah, it has the
yeah, but
21.
you got 14.8, 15.1 of the others.
Hang on, let me look.
Well, and the,
Oh, okay, so I just took 1A out,
Yeah.
so we've got 1B, 1C, A1, so this is fun, right? So you get 16.3 acres within the station area, so.
which
you've
is
got-
okay,
So, yeah.
dropped, but still meets.
Okay, you get a final unit capacity of 528. And you get a dwelling unit, I feel there should be a drum roll, you should get dwelling units per acre of 18.79.
Wow, okay,
Really?
so the only place
That's
where.
higher than you show here.
I know.
That's, so Emily, let me,
I,
you
this
said the
is
total,
not, this calculation is not on this.
I see.
spreadsheet.
okay, so the total number of units still doesn't quite get there.
Right, but we can.
But you can tweak the zoning, so you can.
In A,
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
A1.
it's close enough.
Make
It's
it
close enough.
more dense in A1.
Yes, because you're still hitting the 224 and the, hang on, I'm just going to. You need, I've just put these up, so we have them in front of us as we're talking. You need the 14.8 acres, you need the 224, you have
So-
18.79, and you have, hang on, 245. So you just make it with the number of units in the station area. And again, we're doing some very gross mathematical
Yeah, yeah.
calculations here. It should be fine.
And we should look at putting 1D back,
Oh, the powder house.
the powder house.
Yes, because you just need to rezone it for what it is.
Yeah, so let me just throw 1D in as, so 1D as is, obviously. As the
Brings everything
zoning,
down.
brings everything down, but not so much that you're out of compliance.
Our question would be this. You know, we have areas in town that probably should be rezoned, and I think
Right.
you're right, and 1D is one of them.
Mhm.
But the MBTA zoning law is not necessarily the way they should be
Right.
rezoned. So I would reiterate my urging that we go with the absolute minimum necessary to meet the zoning law and no more. And if other areas need to be rezoned, we rezone them to the best possible use and the best end for the town, and not simply to comply with MBTA.
The least impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the least
From the
impact.
town's perspective, not the.
The best, let's say the best impact,
Right.
Well, right,
because it's our choice.
I think, right, but I think what Denny's saying is really important, because if in fact we can sort of improve the zoning situation and meet the state's thing, why not do that?
But why not do it outside of the MBTA zoning if you don't need it to meet the MBTA
Well-
zoning, I think is the.
Well,
is
because
the thing
if-
with D1.
If
Or-
you're
or
needing
D-
the zoning, you wind up affecting things in a way you don't want.
My argument is to
Have to
do the minimum we have
I
to do to
agree.
satisfy MBTA zoning.
But perhaps we can cut back on some of the other, on
Yes.
one A, 1B, 1C,
Mhm.
if we use 1D.
Change the area.
That's right,
Change the areas of those.
Yeah.
yes,
And
That's the point.
yep.
So,
We could cut back on one.
Yeah.
Could we eliminate 1B?
not, does that,
Because that was the connection to Newport Park.
Mhm.
And if we're deleting Newport Park, we don't need that connection.
Keeping
Yeah.
1B but eliminating 1B?
Yeah.
What do you want to do about 1A? Are we putting 1A back in?
Nope.
Nope, okay.
no, 1A has the problem of maybe having the zone, the D
Yeah.
restriction.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, of course. So this has 1C, 1D, A1. And actually I moved my calculations, so let me just get those. back.
Well, it also
It
pushes
can-
things out to Gordon College and the LCD into a pretty dense development.
It also means that 1C.
Sue
and
Philbrick's hands raised.
Area requirements.
I'm sorry, say again?
1C and 1D alone don't meet your station area requirements. You only
Okay.
get 10.4 acres,
Okay.
so.
Sue has got her hand up.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just want to go back a minute to what Richard was saying about doing the minimum. We have heard a variety of concerns from residents, but one is actually, can't we use this as an opportunity? That's not everyone's opinion, but that is the opinion of some residents that we've heard. So I think we can't dismiss that out of hand. We need to just keep talking about, are there ways we can improve our zoning at the same time? We may decide not to do that, but I don't think we can dismiss that out of hand based on the responses that we've received from our engagement events to date.
Okay.
I would agree.
Recommend is that in bringing this forward to town meeting, this is gonna be a challenge in and of itself. When I brought large rezoning before, we tried not to muddy the waters with other things.
Right.
Also, trying to look forward to, let's say, the general district, your business district, and trying to do more of a mixed use zoning district, to try to preserve the retail on the first floor and try and keep the vitality of that district long term. That's much larger discussion, you know, a larger process. And I think, you know, wasn't here for the charge of this task force, but I think if we can stay focused on getting this, because also the short time period we have, and we still have to go through the planning board and review it with them and get it out to the public so they understand it. So I would try and recommend that you do stay focused to the task force. I'm here now taking notes about, you know, these other concerns and these other parts of town, and these are other projects that we can work forward and bring to the planning board and work with them on rezoning for some of those other things that most people think are desirable. I would stay focused on the
Well,
kind of the project in front of us.
I think the trouble is that the things are intertwined, because our charge is really to see if it's possible to meet the MBTA's goals and get the best possible result for the town. And how we do that, I think, is, you know, we're in the process of coming to an understanding about that. And so I don't want to throw anything out just yet.
Well, the two are not mutually
Exclusive,
Right.
that's exactly right.
And I just think, I agree with the town planner. Our time is so limited, we need to concentrate on the minimum for purposes of this task force. And then if we identify other areas that could be rezoned separately, that's a separate project.
This thing that strikes me most is that the MBTA zoning law comes with a lot of its own peculiar requirements. Doesn't allow you to reserve for affordable above a certain percentage. It doesn't allow you to reserve for senior. It doesn't allow you to require mandated first floor retail. It has all these things in it, which really you wouldn't even be thinking about if you didn't have to because of this law. So anything we pull into the umbrella that we're using to consider MBTA zoning has to follow those rules. And those aren't the rules you'd follow if it weren't for the MBTA zoning. If you were thinking about this rationally, what do we do with this plot of land? You wouldn't be applying the laws that the MBTA zoning.
That's a very good point, Richard. Just because we're not setting aside places for subsidized, for elderly, doesn't mean we don't support that. All we're trying to do is follow a law. And if we don't change, and we're changing our zoning to follow that law, does that limit us in any way from making better improvements in the future to our town? Of course not. In fact, I'm in favor of those other things, as Sandy, you know, and therefore we need to make sure that we don't let perfect be.
The enemy of the good.
Thank you. Perfect be the enemy
Yeah,
of the
nobody's
good.
trying for perfect, but we're trying for passage at town meeting.
Yes, in fact.
And passage
Okay,
at town
you're right.
meeting, people
That's
have
something else.
expressed repeatedly the desire for affordable housing.
I totally agree with them.
So, yeah, so there is,
But we still can do
There-
that 10%.
We can do 20%.
Well,
Right.
that's more
I'm
complicated.
not sure we
I don't
can.
think it, no,
Yeah.
let's ask Emily, is it more complicated? I saw Danvers got their approval.
Yeah, I spoke to my colleague today who did the Danvers and he mentioned that Danvers had been approved, so.
So Danvers has got 20% required. If Danvers can do it, why the hell can't we?
Because we've got 2 months.
You
No,
have
it's-
longer to do the EFA because you can put it in, I mean, you could put the draft into HLC and say, we're considering the 20%, we're working on the EFA, we'll have
Okay.
that for you. And they could approve the language and say that's fine, but we still want to see this
Yeah,
EFA.
yeah,
So you have a little bit more time than 2 months on that. I do, just if you don't mind me jumping in, before I leave today, I want to make sure that we talk about the mandatory mixed use district, because there's some implications there, so, but I don't want to stop this conversation.
We have drawn districts, I'm in particular thinking of 1B, with one intention. I think we could, if we wanted to include, oh, God, 1G, you could cut down on the area used in 1A.
1B.
No, 1B,
one-
yeah. the
1A, 1A.
The- the
1A 's
line.
off.
Yeah.
the green.
But the 1B
Yes.
was our connector between 1C and 1A.
Yes, and the larger scale map is underneath this
Yeah.
one, so if you all, I got my handy trusty Sharpie and the larger scale map, so feel free to skip on that.
Bear with us, folks in the Zoom land, we are we're working on a table that,
Can you put that map up on the
yes, I
screen so people
can.
can actually see what we're
Let me just
looking at?
make sure. I can't put it as you're drawing it, but I can. put
No,
the
no, but
color
if you
map
can
up
put
there.
it so the folks in Zoom land can see what we're looking at.
And why did we have the problem with 1D?
I had only taken it out because of the level of density was pulling everything down, but if you
But that's
change that
existing zoning,
density,
'cause
yeah,
the
exactly.
existing
Okay.
zoning does not match the development that's there.
All right, that's the
We,
inside.
we don't have a problem, sorry, so.
Right, yeah.
We don't at all. In
So,
fact, it's a great
one-
thing to include and tweak this.
So 1A, no, we're out of A. 1C is 7.6 acres. And 1D is about 3 acres, so 10, so we need 5 acres out of 1B. Theoretically,
we dropped that to 3 acres.
we need 5.
Right.
Because
We've
need
got 3
four-
here.
We need 14.8 total.
Yeah, we need
So,
15.
but if 1A and 1D is out, if we put that in.
No, we're putting in 1D, which is only 2.8 acres.
Okay,
And then, so that's, and then you add the 1C, which is 7.6 acres.
Just for
And
people
that's
who are looking at home,
10.4,
this is 1D.
so we need about 5 out of 1B. To come to the almost 15 acres.
And then we leave 1A out because of the deed restriction.
Right, we're leaving 1A out, but we can cut back on 1B. So we can pull it
Make it
down,
more slender or make it shorter.
Make
bring it
shorter.
closer, yeah,
Bring
shorter,
it closer to downtown.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have, okay, do you have an idea of how you want to reduce 1B or do you? want
Yeah, we
play
wanna
around with
take
that?
out enough acreage up at the top here to bring it down
Okay.
to 5 acres.
Okay. I'm making it. Yeah, we can certainly test that and see what that looks like. That I cannot do live.
Okay.
Geography live.
You've been
doesn't-
doing a lot of great stuff live, Emily. That's like fine. It's so good for people. I'm glad you got that up. That's great.
Zoom back out so people can see all the numbers. I want to zoom in while you were talking about it. So yes, we can certainly do that test. Am I hearing you want to take the G1 out? I'm hearing that you want to take B out. D is the red here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
and but we wanna include 1D.
Yes, got that one.
So it's really a very concentrated area that's already fairly dense down.
And then you want to keep, I'd have to change to the other map to show the others, so let me just do that very quickly, but do you want to keep,
1A.
1A,
You know, we want
A1.
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 We want
Keep
A1, not A.
And I'm assuming that because of this, you do not want to do Gordon College, correct?
Wow.
Because that will be tricky.
I think, well, the thing of it is, that Denny's been doing some good work with Gordon. Maybe he should talk about that at some point, but, I mean, if we're going to present people with options, certainly out of the circle, it's good to not just say, well, there's one option and it's only.
Let's think about it. What do we think is the best choice? If we had the Gordon College land and we had A, what would be the arguments to select between the two?
I think,
I'll make.
yes,
What's
and
least- What's
you can
least
tell,
damaging to
Denny,
water
you can tell
resources?
me if I'm wrong. But one of the concerns with using
Gordon,
the A area, the A1 area,
yep,
is you're now introducing residential in that section of the LCD, which is across the street from the SLV property.
it's also, if you blow it up, Emily, there's quite a piece, a good sized piece of the parcel that is watershed land. That feeds into Sawmill Brook.
But so does Gordon College. I mean,
Gordon College is all over.
Yeah.
across
Well,
Travelers Hall.
I thought there was
I'll
10
weigh
acres that
in
you could
and say, I
isolate.
think using 1A for residential is great because there are gonna be a bunch of people that have to work at cell signaling who need a place to live.
Right.
And it would be
Exact-
great for
positive.
them to roll out of bed and walk to work. I think that's a great idea. And it sounds stupid, but you know, it's sort of a
No, no, I think-
practical idea.
So what are the arguments for Gordon?
Well,
Ask
how
me that
many-
Question, I thought we were trying to take some of the density out of the downtown.
Yeah.
And, that was a relatively easy way to do that. And,
And it's also an area that's less affected, at least according to that map and the watershed area.
well, the other, actually, there's a couple of other reasons that
It's
you
the
need.
conservation.
The deal that's sort of been talked about is on the table. What is something along the lines, I think everybody got a copy of the proposal, but basically. You're carving out 110 or 140 acres, whatever it is. 20 acres that we have to agree on the location, which would be a long ways away from town water drinking supply. And put the rest of it in conservation, which to me, is valuable when you start thinking of the long-term implications for the town.
And a good sale at town meeting.
Well, I think you would find that you would get Concom to be supportive of it. And I think let's not lose sight of the fact that a lot of this 40A has to do with the concept of transit-oriented development. Simply meaning people can walk to the train, get on the train, go to work. And that's less cars, less pollution, all those kinds of things. And that's, it's funny because it's really not as well stated in the goals and objectives of 40A. You don't hear much about it, but the underlying benefit is the fact that people presumably can walk to work, which means a lot less cars and all the benefits associated with that. The Gordon College thing, we have gotten some traction. The letter of intent that I submitted, I did get a long voicemail late this afternoon. Gordon has retained counsel to review the non-binding letter of intent.
Okay, so there's something you want me to do, they're taking it
So,
seriously.
we are dealing with an institution. And they're gonna be slow and they're gonna be careful. But it's for them. This is a potential payday. They're actually talking to developers as well. For their benefits, they could walk away with $10 or $15 million. But from our standpoint, if we can assure the safety of our drinking water and take a huge chunk of land and put it in conservation. I don't know how you put a dollar value on that.
Those are pretty good outcomes.
I'm sorry.
Those are pretty good outcomes.
Yeah. So,
Well,
The only
can you tell
challenge
us
is, can it be done in time?
with the parcels we're talking about within the circle,
Yes.
what remains to be done in terms of units outside of the circle?
I'm gonna put all of 1B back in for a second there and remove A1 and tell you.
And while she's doing that, it occurs to me that this is the kind of deal that doesn't require MBTA zoning.
Right.
Well, that's
I was
true.
kind of thinking that
Right.
actually, as you said.
Well, except it's not zoned for that.
No, but
No, we'd have to
Except
change the
for-
zone.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully the planning board
Outside of
would be-
MBTA.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about town meetings.
Yeah.
And
MBTA zoning is going to be an accelerator. It's going to be an accelerator. to the housing development. I mean, without the MBTA zoning law, without the pressure of the state, it might be hard to get.
Right.
Mhm.
But I don't think,
It's a good point.
I don't think Gordon College would be as a separate entity
Hmm.
if you were going to make 20 odd acres developable.
Yeah.
And get 100 and over 100 acres of
You
conservation
think
land
you think that'd be appealing no matter what?
I would
think
think
probably
so.
right. Yeah,
and protect the watershed.
so we could pursue this, just as we're pursuing it, might or might not work out for this.
Depends on the
purpose, but it's Still a good thing.
Yeah,
So if you put 1B in at 5 acres,
okay.
1C and 1D in, you would have 15.4 acres, so you've got your 14.8, you would be 14.8. You would still have, well, so part of the problem is by changing the 5, I can't then, it's a different model, so. But what I can tell you is that, let's just say we redistributed the density in 1B across 1C and 1D, just so it all stayed equal
Yep.
for purposes
Yep.
of today. You'd be at 257, so you're meeting your 224. You'd still be at 13.45. So what you would want to be looking at is, do we increase the density on A1, or somewhere else, to
By 300.
offset that?
And what would we have to increase it to?
It's 300 units
Wait a
that we're
minute.
looking.
What would we have to increase the density to?
So if I put A1 as is back in, just under the
Yeah.
current parameters, you bring it up to 200, it brings 283 units. It brings your density up to 17, so, the acreage,
The reason I raised the concern is I think I'm not sure how acceptable it is to folks in town to take the place where the doctor's buildings are and say, oh, we're gonna allow 300 units there, which is what we're talking about.
your problem
So-
is you don't have enough acreage now. You're at 30.8 and you need 37, so that would be, we'd have to.
So we don't
find-
have enough acres and we've got apartments that are 300 apartments. So that's why I think throwing out Gordon College is a mistake.
Don't we also need half
I think
continuous?
the only question is can it be done in
Works
time?
that way.
It has to be removed from being used for educational purposes in order to be included.
Say that
Can we
again.
not have?
We'll have to see.
It has to be removed, Gordon College has to be removed from use as educational purposes in order to include it in the MBTA zone.
So
Well,
between now and
um,
September, Gordon has to sell that to a private.
No, or
No.
change the owner.
That,
Well,
well,
I think it's owned by the Gordon Foundation, which I presume is tax exempt entity, but they could convey it tomorrow to a for-profit
Right.
LLC.
Right.
Yeah,
So I don't think that's accurate. I think if we can get them on board, they could change the ownership. They could convey it tomorrow.
Just create a new LLC.
sure.
Yeah, okay.
You're actually, it's 19.2, 1B, 1C, and 1D together. At the 8.8 is 19.2. If you drop 1B down to 5 acres, you're correct. It is not enough. It's not.
right. So we have to keep B.
You have to keep B, but we could drop the density on B.
Okay.
Okay.
And see what that looks like, right? I mean, it's another test, so.
Drop the density, but you still have to allow multifamily, so.
You still have to allow multifamily. But you
Yeah.
could-
But it could be
You got
three or more.
secondary lot size and, there's lots of tricks.
Yeah, we
Right.
created a sub-district basically.
Yeah.
So my next task in that case would be to look at those and say, okay, if I do this, if I do that, if I do the other, what does that do in terms of redistributing the density across that contiguous area? And then we talk about it
Right.
and see whether or not it makes sense, so.
Yeah, because we feel the 1D density can go up substantially.
So, okay, so that satisfies the contiguous requirement, therefore we can have separate zones outside. And,
Is that 50%?
Well, and we can have subzones within the zone.
right, but I'm trying to get at the point that we have to have half the acreage in one contiguous zone. And we've just satisfied that with B, C, and D.
Yeah.
So that, now when we look back at A and 1A and Gordon. Does 1A do it, does 1A is not enough, right? A1's not enough.
For what?
How big is A1?
A1,
13 acres.
13 acres.
Yeah, so that's not enough.
Now we're now back up to 32.2, so you need just under 5 acres.
Close but no cigar.
Yeah. That's why it gets tricky to get the numbers exact.
A is 23 acres.
A is 23 acres.
So,
So even 10 acres at Gordon.
So use 20, use A instead of A1, I guess,
yeah, or Gordon.
Or Gordon.
or garden, yeah.
So the places of high density are a little bit separated.
So
And I wanted to,
Don't you expand, like use use all of A1 and a portion of A?
They're individual lots, and I don't think we can break up the lots.
If you clearly define the
You
area.
have to do the model based on a single parcel, the entire parcel. You can't break the parcel up.
Oh,
that's just how the model works.
that's how the model works.
So
So
maybe
that's
you-
not a zoning mode.
I know, but it's-
Development. Yeah. You know, one of the things that would lower density requirements would be this mandatory mixed use thing. And mostly people are very much in favor of adding, at least the folks who've spoken to me, talk positively about adding a layer, you know, downtown.
But I think,
And I'd like to understand how it works.
but I
want to talk to you all. about
I
it.
think that you could add residential to that area outside of the MBTA zoning and only have to have one level of residential, not two. And that might be more acceptable than having 3 stories, requiring the 3 stories.
That's gonna be a very complex undertaking.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
So I want to go back, pull back a little bit. If we're gonna be offering different alternatives, I think we've kind of zeroed in on one possible alternative. But there, we have to come up with more alternatives, which is
I
gonna
don't know.
require.
Oh, I think so.
So your question.
So we may want to say, is there an alternative where we don't have to rezone the LCD, which might cause trouble?
So one question is, do you want your alternatives to be geographic alternatives? Do you want them to be the same geography but different levels of dimensional
Density.
standards and density? You want both? So and if you're presenting 3 or 4 alternatives, you have that room to test different options.
I think if we just present one geography and say, this is the geography that we can fiddle with, that's gonna be trouble.
problematic. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's part.
Distinction without a difference.
but I think,
Correct. That's why I'm interested in the mandatory mixed use sites. Yeah, it's not an MBTA district, but it's an option that
But
changes.
it doesn't
some
solve any
things.
of our geographic
No.
problems.
our problem is the acreage.
It doesn't
Well,
solve
not
any
if
of our
you're in
acreage,
Gordon.
doesn't solve any of our acreage problem.
It solves density problems though, so it allows you to do lower density elsewhere in
You
the
lower unit capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, you still have to meet the 15 units per acre. density
overall.
Overall, but it reduces your capacity. It does not reduce your station area requirements, though. It just reduces overall. unit
I
capacity.
understand your enthusiasm about this, and I was initially enthusiastic about it, but I just don't see how in the heck we could possibly get that done
Right,
in a way that we would be happy with in time.
I agree. I think it's too complicated. And I don't think we gain much from it because of the other requirements.
We don't gain much from it. All we gain is a little bit of a hit density, and our real problem, as Chris points out, is if we want an alternative geography, we're gonna have to pick out some other areas inside the circle. And it's got nothing to do with that mixed use.
Do you want to go over the requirements for the mixed use district? Because they do actually have some requirements for that. The word. So here it is, 5C of the compliance guidelines. The EOHLC is now thinking about the existence and impact of mixed use development zoning districts, and they're very clear that this is to help preserve exactly what you're talking about, which is viable commercial downtown. So has to be in an eligible location where existing village style or downtown development is essential to preserve pedestrian access to amenities. I don't think you have any problem with that, check. There are no age restrictions or limits on unit size, number of bedrooms, bedroom size, or number of occupants, and the residential units permitted are suitable for families with children. Straight from 3A, obviously you're creating a new zone, you're fine. Mixed use development in the district is allowed as of right. And as that phrase has been interpreted, and that includes with respect to affordability requirements. So they're going to have the 10% 80 unless you do the EFA, and that's fine. The requirement for non-residential uses is limited to the ground floor of buildings. So you can only say the ground floor is non-residential. And in no case, or you can only require that it's residential. And in no case represents a requirement that more than 33% of the floor area of a building, lot, or project must be for non-residential uses. So in other words, a developer could come and say, hey, I want, 100% of my ground floor or 50% of my ground floor to be non-residential, but you can't require that. You can't go above 33%.
30% of the ground floor.
No, at the total.
Building, lot, or project. Yeah.
That's why I'm confused
spent
about
some-
my project.
I did, you know what, I sat there and I did some diagramming out this afternoon because I was equally confused by that. But it essentially, if you've got a project that spans more than one lot, so they're talking about the building area, they're talking about the lot area, and they're talking about.
So you
what I'm
have to
saying
have
is-
at least 2 stories of residential.
Well, no, because you could still have some residential on the first floor and
You
the
could,
attic or
exactly,
something.
Right.
Yep, absolutely, so. The requirement for non-residential uses does not preclude a minimum of 3 residential dwelling units per lot, that just goes back to the 3A definition of multifamily. Allows a broad mix of non-residential uses as a right in keeping with the nature of the area, I think you would be fine. There are no minimum parking requirements associated with the non-residential uses allowed as of right.
So that's that's the stores.
It's the stores.
That's the ground floor, absolutely. So I do have a question.
There's parking there now.
But you can't require
You can't
that.
require
They
it.
can have it, they
Yeah.
can have it. they
Yeah.
just
We
can't-
got a great store for you. Only
So,
problem is there won't be any customers.
well, I've got a question into HLC on 2 parts of this. One is, does that apply to all non-residential uses? So in other words, if you allowed, I don't know why you would do this, but just say you do, if you allowed a single story or a 2 or 3 story commercial, but it was all office, you allowed a standalone office, does the no parking requirements apply to that? So I'm waiting for that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm also waiting to find out if you can put a parking maximum on there. The reason being that if you say we're not requiring any parking, somebody could come in and say, well, I think that 50 parking spaces would be perfect for my 1,000 square foot store, and you have no control over them. So I'm waiting to find out. I can't see that because parking is expensive, but I like to look at.
My concern about Beach Street is when you go down Beach Street, there's all these little storefronts that look different. If you're now going to make that a mandatory mixed use and allow residential on top, it's all one lot, somebody's gonna come in and tear it all down and make one building so the facade would be the same on the street level rather than the interest there is today. That's my concern.
Doesn't that depend on what design standards we apply?
Yeah, but there's gonna be a limit as to what you can do.
Well, let me just say that if you're a retail developer.
Yeah.
And you figure, okay, our average retail tenant is gonna be 4,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got 3 of them in a row.
Mhm.
You don't wanna have the same facade across 3.
Okay.
Because you're never gonna lease them.
Right.
Each tenant wants to have their own signatures. So Kayla wants to look like Kayla. And Mari
Okay.
wants to look like, I mean, I think it's just in my experience, we have shopping centers, we do our utmost to make the different storefronts different. Look at Market Street in Linfield.
All the
And
same.
Not really, no, if you look at the Apple Store and look at Williams Sonoma,
But it-
very different.
No, but it doesn't have the character of what
Well,
we have on Beach Street
It
today.
reads to you
Well,
the same, but it's really not.
But
I mean, to the typical retail customer, they look different. And I understand what you're saying. nobody's gonna recreate Beach Street the way it is.
Right, if
I mean,
you,
that's
if
pretty
you.
tough.
Well,
so-
I mean, the question that there's a thing underlying all of this, which is about how do we prevent tear downs? I mean, is there any way to do that? Tear downs? No.
You can have
Well,
a
I don't-
demolition delay, you can have a historic district.
We were talking in another community about some of the options that you could put in for preservation of historic buildings. One of them would be to remove the parking requirements for the historic portion of the building, but if now you're creating a district in which those aren't required at all, it's less of an incentive. So I think you would have to consider very carefully what you want to do with your mixed use area, and given the requirements under 5C, do those make sense with what your goals are for the area, or would it be better to zone it as mixed use but with a different set of standards? So, you know, I'm all in favor of reducing acres and acres of parking, but there's also, you know, retailers need parking, and so there's a balance there, and have to think about whether or not these requirements meet your
I
needs.
think we're heading into a very nasty thicket for this.
I do too.
Given, I would love to find some way to rezone the gas station.
Mean the sea breeze, right?
This is one, I have several actually, but
I thought you wanted to preserve 1950s buildings.
no, not 19. And Seabreeze is actually quite old,
Yes, it is.
but it's ugly. But if there were some way, the problem is getting 5 acres
Right,
out of there with starting at the gas station, because the lot that Crosby's is on is split in the middle of Crosby's.
well, what happened to the one
That is
we,
incredible.
But how about if you had 1012 Summer Street to it?
yeah,
If you add 10 foot,
oh, that's not much acreage.
that's not much acre.
Well, it's.
That was,
No,
no,
if you do 1012 Summer Street and
It's
you go
about
across,
3 acres.
and then can't we go across this? It's not all one lot across the street on Summer.
Yes, it
on the-
is.
It is,
Yeah.
even on both sides of the park, of the railroad.
No.
Where
On
Madam Dime is and-
Yeah.
There, I drew something
Yeah.
really peculiar that went across that went across the railroad tracks where there's just tiny bit touching. That on the other hand, if we've got one solution that we think is really probably minimally controversial to the town, why do we want to introduce something different that's gonna make people mad?
right. I mean, the lot from Crosby's, it cuts through the middle of the Crosby's building, but it starts from the corner of Beach and goes up through the dry cleaner.
Oh, it does, that's one
Yeah,
lot.
that's one lot.
Okay, sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Half Crosby's and Madam Haddam and
So the only way,
Just Madam Haddam and,
It's one lot.
half of Crosby's is in that.
the only
lot.
way.
so it's only half. Well, it seems like it's
It's
half.
still part of the lot.
The gas station and Summer Street is by going across the street into the downtown.
Right.
And now you're.
Yeah.
in a whole nother-
Right, no,
Yeah, that's the problem.
Or if we go up and take Cars building.
That's great, take it, I don't care.
no, I
That'll
don't.
get us another 100 square feet.
Really? Yeah, what's the size of that lot? Oh my, it's a pretty decent lot size.
Densest building in, in North America.
It is. So,
Free school was dense.
Emily,
Yeah.
I want to be sure I understand something about the runs that you've done.
Yes.
They all assume the existing zoning, so they assume a 3-family.
No, I took that restriction off.
Ah.
So, yeah, I took
It's
that.
just a
Oh,
dimensional,
okay.
it's a dimensional requirement.
It's just the
Dimensional
dimensional
requirements.
requirements. Yeah, so I think there's a couple of pathways for me to go. There's a site called Residensity that Mass Housing Partnership does, where they've got the existing residential density on each lot. And what I plan to do is go back and look at 1D and say, okay, what's the current calculated density of that lot? I can also look at the 1C area, the 1B area. I like to kind of play around with those and see what it would take to zone it to
Yeah.
that level.
That-
Then I'd like to look at A1 and say, okay, this is what it kind of looks like in the middle, and there might be some options around that, right? You've got three basically sub-districts. What does it look like? Then I'd like to go back to A1 and A and have a look at the two of those and see what those do, given what you're doing within
Yeah,
the
because A is
station area.
large.
Yeah.
I think that's really important, and it's important to do in terms of the acceptability, because we're sitting here looking at maps. And the folks who live in that green strip, for example, may not be happy to think that their lot is now zoned for 5 units.
Right. Right, so I think coming back to you with, let's stick with the geography that we have for like another meeting. And come back with you with what it looks like for the dimensional standards, then if you say, I really don't like these options, then we can talk about whether or not we need to change the geography.
Will we keep in the geography gang, both Gordon and the LCD? I would say yes.
So A and A1, yeah, I absolutely think you should. I'm leery of Gordon College, not because I'm leery of the college itself, but because of the steps you would have to take to make it compliant. You know, you would have to have the A&R, you'd have to have this disposition to a for-profit. There are too many
Sort of
steps.
transactional risk.
Well,
Yeah.
what if-
So I'm not
There
saying
is
that
some,
you
but
shouldn't look at it
I-
going forward. I'm just saying for our next step, I'd like to step away from it for a little bit. Maybe you continue all the conversations you've been doing it. We're not taking it off the table. It's just for the next meeting. Let's concentrate on the other geography that doesn't require an ownership change. That's what I'm suggesting.
And an
Because we can
A.
always slip the Gordon College in place of it if we
Right.
manage. If
And I
any-
think we should let Gordon College know the sensitivity of the timing. That we would love to work.
The letter was very
That's
clear.
why we rushed the letter to them.
There's time of the essence, maybe.
I believe the lawyer strikes that one out.
Question, I mean, what would they have to do beyond conveyance title to a for-profit entity?
You have to
They'd have
separate the
to-
lot.
They would have to, yeah, they'd have to separate the lot out because you can only model a single parcel. So they'd have to figure out which part of the land they want to do this work on. They'd have to separate the.
We get to
parcel out.
pick, we get
We
to
get
choose
to
that.
pick that, I think.
Well, we have to work with them.
Yeah, we have to
Yeah.
work. with
Their
them.
land.
Well, they have a big parcel, what is it, 148 acres
Yeah,
or so?
43, yeah.
And they're,
yes.
we're modeling for the sake of today's conversation, we picked 20, we just said
20.
there's 20 acres somewhere
Right.
in there. You
Yeah.
have to figure out where that 20 acres would be in order to create an actual lot for it.
How hard do you think that is, Jenny, to do with that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
How hard to do what Emily was just
Um,
describing?
it's not something that you're gonna do overnight. You'd have to get a surveyor out there. Trying to get a surveyor in today's world is
Difficult.
difficult and time, they're just
Okay.
backed up. So,
They have to
And
get
then you'd have-
approval on the A&R.
and then I can tell you that talking to Steve Gang, he would wanna make sure that he'd wanna have somebody out there
Making sure
verifying
we're right.
where it is in relation to vernal pools and all that kind of stuff. So it's
Mm-hmm.
that, the reality is that's not gonna happen in 30 days.
And what would happen if you included that entire
Parcel and then,
parcel and some of it would be excluded, right?
Yeah,
Some of it would be excluded, your density would go, actually, do I have that model?
Would plummet,
Oh, the
right?
density would crash.
It's a problem.
The density would totally
Oh, I
crash.
mean,
Yeah, it's hot, yeah.
Really big buildings.
It's
though.
like,
That's
holy shit.
That's not where you want to go.
Yeah, I know.
what about if we carved out 20 acres and leased it long-term, 99 years?
It's excluded land. I do not know the answer to that.
Oh, but that's.
Who's leasing it? The town?
No.
No, no.
A for-profit?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know the answer to that. You've gone beyond my legal expertise. on
Yeah,
that
that's a
one,
great-
which is pretty much not.
It's a great
Do you
question.
think is it something you get an answer to?
I could ask it, yeah.
so
absolutely.
I also wonder, why would you need to, couldn't they just separate this one huge lot for now and then the LLC or whatever the new owner is, would be the entity that makes the deal with the town.
We don't have the density, if we include that whole parcel,
No, we were just saying it's gonna be 20 acres, but I guess
we can't, they have to include the whole
You
lot.
have- You're going to have a
Clear.
that clear subdivision of the lot before you submit to HLC.
But
So
the leasing of the land is a very interesting. thing.
leasing of the land is very interesting.
Yeah.
Long-term needs.
On just some identifiable parcel, but, or you could do at least the whole thing, I suppose, with these restrictions on conservation and all that.
I think your perhaps your biggest issue, and I haven't walked that land, so I don't really know it, but might be I think you brought it up, conservation issue.
No, but we walked it with Steve Gang.
He's the head of the conservation.
You have walked it?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, we walked it and,
Sarah trespassed.
yeah, and there seems to be, there's an interest in town to conserving that area.
Right, right.
And it would seem to me that there might be an appetite that if we were able to rezone 20 acres of it and they were willing to put a conservation restriction on the balance of the land, that the town may accept that. Particularly because the lots the areas we walked on were close to Pine Street, not in the watershed.
Well, the question is, are there really 20 acres?
Yes.
That would be
Oh,
acceptable.
well, look.
Acceptable, yeah,
Well, then-
that wouldn't be,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, acceptable to the town, I would think so.
from a
because
conservation perspective,
Oh.
from a wildlife, you know,
Yeah.
from a.
it's- To me, it's water. That's a primary source of water, drinking water for the town. And if you can basically
Protect that.
remove the potential of development proximate to that water, I think that's pretty compelling.
Because today it's all LCD, so somebody can come in and put a development on the whole
no, they
piece,
need
except
to-
for vernal pools.
well, they need to get a special permit.
And two organizations have tried and failed.
They never got to the special permit phase. No.
It is worth pursuing, but it's not our primary, I mean, we can't depend on it. That's
I
what it-
think,
that's
I
what it-
think we have to keep it in our back pocket.
Is there any area on this side of 128 where we could put outside the circle?
What do you mean by this side of one
We
twenty?
had a look
Wait,
at
it's Smith's
a
Point?
couple of them, but certainly happy to look at more with
Keep in mind that you've got to have 50% in one contiguous, oh, we've already solved that.
Yeah.
So that's-
at least for now.
There is some stuff down there.
Well, and there's one,
So in the far sort of right-hand corner, you've already ruled that out. because
Butler
of the
Avenue,
flooding
Raymond
issues.
Street.
Yeah, exactly.
They
what
flooded,
about up near
they flooded in
128
January.
north between Pine and School? Are there any places that make sense?
What do you mean Pine to School?
Well, there's a V between
Part of
Pine
it
and
is
School.
reservation.
Like Old Essex
Farmhouse
Road,
reservation.
Old Essex Road.
Yeah.
We love the plains.
Plans?
Jack's Hill.
Yeah, Jack's Hill.
Just so I can see it again.
Where's Old Essex Road out here?
You know, just because you put zoning on doesn't mean there's gonna be an apartment building.
Right.
I know you have to assume that there might be, but if you rezone the golf course, and said this could be multifamily, my guess is
I
Essex
think
County
we
Club is
found,
not
we
gonna.
find
sell,
it's excluded.
Some.
Why is it
you know,
excluded?
6 acres for.
Because it's green.
That's my guess. I don't know, but
Well, you wouldn't need the whole of Essex County Club, you just take 5 acres, it could be a retirement community.
Isn't this a golf course?
Yeah,
Okay, fine, it's not green. All right.
Could be retirement golf. community.
yeah.
boy, that would be.
Can't
they
do
sell
it.
right out.
You cannot age restrict it.
Yes, golf.
Not age restricted retirement golf.
Okay.
Well, it'd be allowed, it just couldn't be required.
Right.
My job is to pour cold water on the idea, I'm sorry.
All golf
It's your job, thank you.
You look out at the plains, there's not enough acreage out there to accomplish anything.
You know, I just thought of something. We were talking about alternative geographies inside the circle. And when you consider the fact that we just satisfied our 50% requirement by picking B, C, and D, there is no other alternative.
Right.
Well. I
Or you
mean,
could add G.
yeah, what was the one we asked?
I mean, is there another? is there another-
There's a G1.
That's only 10.4 acres, so it doesn't get you the number of acres you need within the half mile.
Oh, you wouldn't take it all by itself. You might take it plus one
What?
other fairly small person. Maybe, 1C. What's the purple one? I'm sorry.
1C is not
No,
contiguous.
It doesn't quite get you there. 1D is what I
1D.
meant.
One
If
D.
it's not contiguous, it's gotta be contiguous.
I
And
thought-
D's 2.7 and G1's 10.2, they're only,
50% of it has to be
12.9
contiguous.
together.
So we're still shy a couple acres.
10 acres.
Yeah, but it's
You
not
need
just
0.7
5 acres.
acres.
You need 0.7 acres,
But it has to be contiguous to one of those, otherwise you'll have to go up to 5
We
acres.
gotta get.
but it has to be contiguous to only one of those. Those don't have to be contiguous to each other.
Right.
But 50% has to be contiguous,
50% of
right?
the total acreage has
No,
to be
the
contiguous.
0.7 that you're missing could be contiguous to 1B, 1C, or 1D.
What 0.7 that we're missing?
You have to have half of your district has to be contiguous.
Right.
Right. you're
Within
missing
the
that.
circle.
But we're talking
No,
about
it doesn't have to
G1.
be within the circle.
It doesn't,
It could be contiguous outside of. the
We're
circle.
talking about G1 though.
Right.
Oh,
Why are you
wait a
talking,
minute.
why are you talking about G1?
G wanted to
I
bring it
wanted,
in,
because we added it to your list and I
but I'm
wanted
saying it's not big enough.
Mhm.
Because it's only 10 acres.
10.
It's but not big enough to be contiguous all by itself.
Right,
Correct, got it,
right.
yes, sorry, I misheard what you would
Yeah.
ask.
But if we had 20 acres out in the LCD, then you could do it.
Yeah.
Right, right.
I'm only pointing out that
If we're looking for options,
we've got, so far, there's only two areas that we've identified, which are more than half contiguous.
Right.
One is AA1 together,
Yes,
and the other is BCD.
yes,
So one of those two is gonna have to be, at least in the current map, one of those two will have to be one of us.
Mhm. Okay, we exhausted.
well,
I mean, I
I
think I
want to
have-
be sure I understand the contiguity thing. How does that work?
you half your acreage has to be contiguous with each other, which means they'll have to be hard.
Okay, that's half of the total acres, so half of 37 acres.
Half of your 30, yes,
And we get there with 1B, 1C, and 1D,
minus 0.7 acres,
which we can,
which, yes, you can,
Right.
Or we get there right now.
or you
We
get there with A.
With the
with
LCD.
the As.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, A includes A1, so.
Right, oh, okay, so-
Yeah.
Or we get there if we did Gordon.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's the downside of including A1 and A together? Because you know most.
Too
of-
much acreage.
Well, but
A is 20, A includes A1 and it's 23 acres.
Oh, A does include it.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
A is
okay, I didn't understand that.
And how many
Okay.
acres is A1?
So-
A1.
13.
13.
13. So that
there's a
doesn't get
good portion of that, even though it might be zoned for residential, probably gonna be developed for a large commercial property, which doesn't exclude it from qualifying, because someday, 30 years from now.
So the other
Did you
thing
see
to
how
remember,
recent
that's a
this
very
is?
good point. The other thing to remember is you try and focus in on one number, one of the requirements, the others kind of get away from each other. So if you would like lower density, you may want to accept additional acreage, right? In other words, you
Okay.
can't necessarily focus on the 37 and the 15 and the 554, 5559. So you might want to let the acreage go in order to focus on lowering the densities. And that's what the tests that I'll do for the next time we talk will help show.
I mean, I think certainly the extent to which we can up the density outside of the half mile and drop it
with
helps, but the problem is you still need 40% of the units
Right, yeah,
within the half
exactly,
mile, so you
so-
don't have much leeway.
Yeah.
Cause I did all sorts of calculations and you
Mhm.
didn't get very far.
And I also know that people who may be listening at home are probably sitting there saying, you know, we're doing a lot of math and we're doing a lot of throwing around of numbers. So just want to say, when we get to the zoning, we also go, you actually writing that, we also go back to ground level, right? And we start talking about how the zoning actually controls what's going to happen. I don't want people to worry as we're saying, well, what about this acre? Or what about raising this or lowering that? There's another step to come on this. So.
Oh, yeah, more than one. More than one.
Time is ticking.
And
When are we gonna see you again, Emily?
Good question. Let me bring up my schedule. I can't remember which date we next said.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Yeah, because to Denny's point,
Oh, I have it scheduled here.
we're under the gun.
Oh, I'm here on the 8th. I'm back on the 8th.
All
So we'll
right.
be looking to
Okay.
give you the results of this next round.
so
on the
it's
8th.
basically every other week.
8, let me see. Yes, it looks like
Mhm.
it's the one conflict looks like I have is March 7th. But so we need to talk about that one. But I'm free on the 29th of February, so I can't change the other one on the March because they booked it like back in, I think it's September or August or
So
something.
after the 8th, the next time you're available is the 29th.
Exactly, so.
So we should definitely schedule that meeting.
Oh, I'm coming on the 22nd.
Well,
Just so you
that's-
know, yeah,
The
yeah.
22nd.
Yeah, I
you
was just gonna figure out, yep, I'll be here on the 8th. I'm
Ouch.
available the
That's a school,
22nd.
that's school
Bless you.
vacation.
Do you want to move the 22nd to the 29th?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
No.
Okay, how much does school vacation week affect anybody here?
Well, the 22nd affects the FinCom meeting.
Good question, Ann.
I remember. Well, I think you're right.
Sorry, you get to that.
Oh, boy. So are we talking about both the 22nd and the 29th? No. No.
You can't do the 22nd?
Well, I'll have to cancel a FinCom meeting.
Or make it earlier.
I probably.
What do you mean make it
I won't be-
earlier?
Probably
Make
won't be
it
here, but
earlier.
No,
I can.
I can't start my FinCom meeting till 7.
Oh.
People work in Boston. They can't get here.
And what did you say, Chris? Can
I
you,
won't be here, but,
on the
yeah,
22nd?
but Gar can.
You're in good.
Can we do the 29th instead of the 22nd?
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can do that if that works for all of
We
you.
can certainly do
So
that.
what do we do?
Leap
We do
year,
the 29th.
February 29th.
Oh,
Yes,
leap year.
the extra
Yeah.
day.
Well, that sounds,
Oh, well,
Say
I'll be in New
right.
Zealand, so,
That's gonna make it hard for you to cover for Chris.
yeah.
well, I'll be here for the 29th.
Yeah, I think good.
All right, so I'm gonna take off the 7th and I'm moving the 22nd to the 29th, and then.
So it's the 8th and the 29th.
Yeah, and I could be here on March, I think the next time after that I'm scheduled to be here is March 21st, so.
Yes.
I don't know why there's that gap, but I am available the 14th, if that would be better.
We can do that.
Let's
Yeah,
do that.
At that point, we're going to be trying to bring this down to something that we can actually present.
right,
Yes.
yeah,
And,
exactly.
and
That's why I was
seeing-
worried.
Seeing you more often then would be important.
And I think the question is, what date did you just say?
I just said I could do the 14th.
Of March.
Of March, I'm going to continue to hold the 21st as well
Yes.
for you. Yeah,
The 21st of March.
21st.
I
Oh,
think-
fabulous.
Yes.
That's great.
The 21st of March?
You know, that might be a meeting where we engage with the planning board.
Yeah, one of those
Yeah, that's a
March
good idea.
meetings would be,
Yeah.
try and do a joint meeting.
You know,
And the other thing I think we have to think about is, are we gonna want handouts for the annual town meeting?
absolutely.
So we need those.
Yeah.
I would certainly.
On our list for
recommend
Tuesday.
We do that, but we ought to follow the KISS principle, keep it simple.
Right.
That's it.
Exactly.
The, the last couple of town meetings when we've talked about zoning. What are you laughing about?
We won't be talking about zoning at the annual town meeting. We may have a handout, but our moderator does not accept things on the floor for discussion that are not votable.
Yeah, and it won't be.
So we said the
We won't be
14th of
at
March and the 21st.
The 14th and the 21st, yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my calendar done.
Yes.
So What's
Hi.
the next step here? though?
Press.
So are we gonna start to think about what it means on the ground for?
Next step is for me to remodel what we talked about today and give you some dimensional standards options and what those look like and how we, what are the options that get us to compliance? So you have some different things to talk about. I think you all are still talking about Gordon College and the compliance. I'm gonna focus on the others. I'll come back in 2 weeks and show you what that looks like.
Okay.
Then ideally, we would start to move towards thinking about drafting the zoning, but that's where my question about when and how do you want to talk about the boundaries with the public? Because you could, one way to do it is to say, here are the boundaries, here are the different options for dimensional standards, here's all the text, what do you think? The other way is to break it up.
I
and
think it needs to
say,
be together.
Okay, so then.
I think that you need to you see the geographical boundaries, and then you need to understand the consequences of the zoning.
And we
Yeah,
probably
within
need
those boundaries.
architectural standards.
Yep.
Right.
too.
So the nice thing then, I think, would be maybe it's a conversation among yourselves about when you want to take that package to the public. We need to talk about how town meetings sort of gets back to the HLC. And then we can kind of put that schedule together and see from where we are now, 2 weeks from now, to where we need to be in June, to where we need to be in September. There's some interesting fall scheduling things we need to talk about too.
So
Yeah.
is there some standard language that an overlay district looks like that we can start?
Oh, boy, that would be great.
So there's this thing called the sample zoning that is on HLC's website. I happen to know very personally the person who worked with MHP to write that. So I would start there. There's also very good commentary about things that you should think about when you're doing the zoning. That is certainly where not only I, but every other consultant who's looking at an overlay, except for some of the more complex ones where they're going to form-based code. I think that's where everybody is starting. So I would have a look at that, but certainly, when I was moving forward, and then you can start to see the areas where you'll want to make some decisions, some judgment calls, and then the areas where we can continue to use the boilerplate language, but it's all completely customizable, but it gives a framework for discussion.
Can you send us links or
Yeah,
whatever?
absolutely.
We have a hand raised,
Yes.
Christine Delacio.
Well, we're gonna take public comment later.
So yeah, I'm happy to send links for those. Let me just note that down.
Later tonight?
And I'll also send the presentation that I did today.
Good,
So
yeah.
you can have a look at it since I didn't bring my magnifying glasses with me.
Right, you need big.
And we can post that on our website.
Well, I'm sorry to be so quick, but I think the question people are gonna wanna know when they start to look at maps, they will be looking at lots and saying, okay, on this lot, what could be built?
Yeah, and that's where the zoning piece comes in.
That's what we were just
So,
talking
yeah.
about, doing the zoning together with the geography.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
But when will we have any sense of that at all, by the next time we meet?
No, we've got to concentrate.
I think once you see the different levels of dimensional standards from our next conversation, then yes, we could have a chance to look at what the sample zoning looks like. But once we get a sense of you want to move to this direction versus that direction, we can start putting those into the sample zoning and then calling out the areas where we still need some decisions.
And
So
the model itself shows the units per parcel.
the model does show you.
So once we have a model in place, that the model itself shows the number of units that can be built on each parcel. That's how it works.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so
That could actually be mapped if that's of interest. We've done that before, where we map out so people can look at a parcel and say, oh, there's a unit capacity of X on a parcel. So sometimes it's valuable for conversation, sometimes it's not. That amount of information detracts from the overall discussion.
I think it's a level of detail that we have to look at in our group.
Right, we
Because when you look
so
at that,
do.
when you look at that, you get a completely different feel for what it is that you've just done.
right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah, happy to
right.
do those maps.
here, here.
And then you have to decide whether you've got to do zoning with maximums.
Yep, and that's part of the
Yes.
controls, you know, as I said, I think at the beginning, we're just right now just working with the sort of the basic density standards. There are other controls that we could put in, knowing that that will limit, primarily that will limit unit capacity and density. Obviously, it doesn't
That's
change
the
the
problem.
geography, but
you know.
so there's a balance there as well.
And I think from my point of view, I don't know what the rest of the task force thinks, but my vote is that in working on these models, we should take these numbers down to the minimum that we have to have. In other words, whatever tuning you have to do, let's do it now as a starting point. To take these things down to the bare minimum of what we have to have.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I mean, this
That's a
is
baseline analysis.
this is by right, and somebody can always come in and apply for something
A special permit.
beyond the minimum.
You can even do that in the zoning
Well,
if
then
there's
they-
something you
then
want
they have
to
to face
create an incentive for.
power of the state,
Ah,
the power of the Manchester. zoning.
right, Sarah. You're gonna find it with the ground.
Performance criteria.
But here's something just to think about on that, because you could certainly do, here's the base minimum. This is as close as we can get to the base. But you know what, there's something extra that we'd really like to have. Maybe it's a deeper affordability, maybe it is mixed, probably not one of these districts. Well, actually maybe you want a little bit of mixed use in A to help out the people who are living next door to, you know, the jobs that are coming in. Maybe you want them to have a little store or something there. Because you've done the base, you could always then add an incentive on top of that.
We
for
can
the
take
thing
more
that you
density in
want.
exchange for affordability, for example.
Absolutely, or you make the A district a mixed use by right district that includes multifamily by right. Put some limitations on how much mixed use you want.
Mhm.
Again, these are options to discuss. They're not me saying you should do this, but you have more flexibility. That I think
Shape things.
exactly to shape. things.
Sarah, isn't Pine Street, that's G, right?
Where
No, it's
No,
D.
I mean,
It's D.
our general district.
the green part here,
Yeah.
1B is not general district.
Isn't it?
So it's not currently
It's,
zoned.
it's
D, D2 or something.
yeah, it's,
I see.
it allows the, by special permit, two units per
Doesn't allow business.
lot. No,
No, it doesn't.
no business there.
But you might, that might be something to consider, and that's certainly something that we can talk about, so.
1C is general district, yeah.
Right, so that's another example. That's an area that could be left as a possible,
Lower density.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, could be left as an option, as an optional mixed use.
oh, yes, yes,
And why not?
yes,
You'd want to,
the Elm Street area, yeah,
you'd have to. Yep.
right, yeah, because there's retail there now, or
There's a bunch of retail there.
offices.
Yeah,
That's
the
no
shops, the
Yeah, the architects and stuff.
office.
Okay.
Mariposa.
That's great.
Mariposa.
I'm just making a note about keeping mixed use in 1-C.
Thank you so much. I mean,
My pleasure. I hope that I found this useful to have. I hope you.
Yeah,
found it
no, I
useful.
feel like we're making some progress at last.
it's wonderful to have all the iterations to try and understand what is possible.
It's a very complex set of decisions and.
Simultaneous equation there, yeah.
How many town meetings have you gone through this?
I've only gone through one town meeting so far. That one, I'm sorry to say, I'm sorry, I've gone through one town meeting, that one failed. I've gone through a city council, that passed,
And how big
honestly.
a town was the town meeting approximately?
It's a good question. I think it was like maybe 20, I think the population was maybe 19 or 20.
Okay,
I
so
don't
quite a
know.
bit bigger.
Quite bigger, yeah.
Okay,
it's
okay.
Bigger, and they did it in the fall, thinking that they were almost certainly going to have to come back in the spring, so I think it was a test run.
Okay.
Rather than necessarily
Yeah,
expecting,
yeah.
yeah.
Did you, learn anything in terms of how the presentation was made and.
Yes.
Great question.
You have some suggestions as to what we ought to be
She
thinking
will
about?
give them to us when we get there.
Absolutely.
And what are those suggestions?
Well, for one thing, I think getting information out and front of town meeting well in advance is really important. The type of information we can talk about, you mentioned something at town meeting, I think setting expectations for town meeting members as to when they're expected to vote, when the public hearings are, as much information as possible about the process we can get to them. Where to find the information, I like the idea of keeping it simple. I think so if people are coming forward on the floor of town meeting with misinformation, it's too late to correct it at that point. So, and you all know this because you've been through town meeting, but I think making sure that the appropriate information is out there, that it's clear and easy to read well before town meeting is really important.
This is so simple, so it shouldn't be a problem.
I would also recommend potentially having maybe a forum a week or so before town meeting to just have questions asked and answered
Oh
there.
gosh, I hope we'll have a
Well,
number of.
Oh, good. That
Oh,
would be
but
good.
she's saying
You've done a
close to
great
town
job.
meeting.
You've done a
Yeah.
great job already. You started public conversation long before. I came on board and I think just continuing that, giving people, we've done a couple of meetings recently, and I know you have other things on your agenda, but where it's just a Q&A. It's a very brief, this is why we're here today, this is the status of the meeting or the status of the process and coming to this, what questions do you have? And the more questions you can have asked and answered and maybe have written fact sheets to address before town meeting, the better. So, I mean, just in my overall.
There will be people who are opposed to it.
Yes.
And
Oh, no.
and some of them will be influencing other
Yes.
people. So the trick is going to be to get to the people, get out beyond the circle of people we've reached so far.
Right, yes, yes.
I think we should send guard door to door.
Yeah.
You better help me out on this committee. It's like, oh, boy.
It's likely that we'll have 600 people at the town meeting.
You're an open town meeting.
Yeah.
Right, yes.
This makes it, because the largest forum that I remember having was something early on about SLB, which had 100 people at it.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh, I can't. believe
And that was during
That was
COVID,
big.
full
That was
zone.
big.
Yeah.
But so more likely, we have a forum, will fill, maybe 30 people.
Right. Strategy for an open town meeting, slightly different, but not too far off that one, but slightly different. We can talk about
Yeah,
this
but
moving forward.
open town meeting is unpredictable.
Well, but you know,
Representative town meeting can be pretty unpredictable sometimes too, but open town meeting has a different,
With the
much different level.
With a representative town meeting, you know who your audience is.
Yes, absolutely.
And we're getting some random 600 out of the 2,000 voters.
Yep.
but we've been fairly fortunate with the events we've held, the density walk and the initial.
But for
forums.
20 people, 30
No,
people.
no, there were 70 people.
Well,
I
But
mean,
just
no, but you
do, once
Out of
we
20,
have options.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
yeah.
we're gonna bring.
out of 3,000 voters, I mean.
One thing I've been wanting to
Well,
do.
we may have a question here.
Yes, we do.
Yeah,
we're gonna-
yeah, we've got some questions.
We're gonna get there after you get through the. it's on the agenda.
We'll talk further.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Emily.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my question was actually for Emily. Hello,
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh,
please
Sure.
hold for Emily. It was a
Sure.
comment, really.
okay, Christina, go
Quick
ahead.
comment, sorry. So, Emily, thank you very much. Christine Delicio, 6 Lincoln Ave, member of the planning board. So I'm trying to follow along. And as a person who understands these zones quite well, Emily, my only critique would be to maybe perhaps correlate your 1As and A1s to the actual zone, because I understand what you're trying to do, but I feel like people that do maybe understand this, you're actually making it more complicated. And if you made your 1As or A1s with the zone that it actually correlates to, it may be easier to understand. Did that make sense? I know other towns or communities use Z's and, but we're A, B, C, D, E, and pretty much L. So when you're using those, go ahead.
What do you think about just naming them for where they are? Like
That's what I'm exactly, that was my suggestion. So if it's in District A, use A. If it's in District G, use G. Like that was my suggestion there.
If we say Powderhouse Lane, let's say Powderhouse and Elm Street. You know,
Well,
just name the
Then it's
places.
clear, because
Mm.
people don't know
People
what the
don't know where
zones are.
Ds are and Rs and Gs are either.
I'm just finding that the A's when it's in District B or C was actually too much. So we need to just use the zone that it's in or something else. That was my comment there.
Names. We'll
Yeah.
work on names.
That's great. That's great feedback. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's very
So,
helpful. Thank you,
yeah.
Christina.
And I actually just had another couple questions, and comments, and I'll just spew them out. And if you want to answer them later, it's just my comments. You don't need to respond. So this is the first I'm hearing about some compliance guidelines. Emily, could you forward those, or does the MBTA zoning board have this? Is that a public document?
Yeah, it's on the state's website. If you go
Okay.
to EOHLC's, that's the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities.
Okay.
Their MBTA Communities Act website. Everything I've mentioned, so the compliance model, the compliance guidelines, which is what
Yeah. Okay.
zoning, all of
I
those.
can find it. Okay, great. So the other thing is, my understanding is that in order to ask about the 20% versus 10, is that we need to do a financial feasibility study.
Yep.
Okay, so have we talked about that? Are we going to do that? And I think RKG is the firm to do that. Do they have capacity to do that? Like I said, no need to answer now, but if we are interested in doing that, because we are so far behind on our 10%, how's timing, financial money that our town has to request that? So I mean, it's nice that we say that, but it sounds like a little more involved, but I definitely believe as a resident that we should be pushing for the 20% versus 10. But the whole financial analysis, my understanding, is a little more complicated. So those are my two comments. Thank you.
I've seen one that's not very complicated and probably doesn't take more than a couple of weeks to do.
Yeah, so RKG is our partner on this. We brought them on because we knew that was an option you were
Yeah.
looking at.
Yep.
I can check with Eric and see how long they take. I know they've built a model to do it, so it's
Yeah.
running it through that.
Yeah.
So it's just lining it up with others that he's doing.
Yeah, it's not a ream of paper. It's.
Right.
So do we get, I'm sorry, then I'm gonna have a follow-up question. Do we actually have input on what the model looks like?
It's a standardized model, and beyond that, you'd have to talk to Eric. I don't know the details. of the
All right,
model.
could then someone through Emily forward to me what the standard model includes? Thank you.
Sure, okay. Thank you, Christina. Oh, looks like Mary's got a question now, the other. Board.
Before Emily leaves, if possible.
Of course.
Mary Foley, One Pulaski, also on the planning board. If a state, if a town adopts these state overlay district, if the town then wants to change something within the overlay district, do they have to get the okay by the state before it goes to town meeting?
You'd have to take it back to the state and make sure it's still in compliance. That's correct.
Okay, so these definitely become state kind of owned, controlled districts.
State reviewed, yeah, under the current law, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Run fast.
All right, next on the agenda is reports from the subcommittees. I guess the communication subcommittee couldn't meet this morning, so is there anything you need to say?
Not really. We had a Zoom glitch, so we're continued to Tuesday, 10 a.m. I apologize to everyone who tried to tune in. I was also trying to tune in, which is how we discovered it all. But I apologize to folks who set aside their time and it didn't work. So next Tuesday at 10. I did want to say, Denny, we hear you on Keep It Simple. That is one of my big mantras in all of this. And in every time we have a public engagement or create a new document for the website or add to anything, we are thinking about that. So we are thinking about that in terms of how to best explain this and convey the information. And I hope if we're not keeping it simple, that people will speak up and ask. I think that's it from communications right now.
Okay. Richard, from the design guidelines.
Well, we had our first meeting. I think it was a good one. We had Sarah and Chris, and we were fortunate to get 4 members of the Manchester architectural community involved, and they're all interested in working on the project and are working on the project, and Mark attended as well. So at the first meeting, we had some general discussions about guidelines, about town character, about how we would proceed in developing design guidelines, about whether they would apply to the whole town or part of the town or the zoned areas, whether they would be optional or required. And there's opinions on that, but our recommendations will come when they come, and we'll figure that out once we get there. We broke up into 3 groups. The 3 groups right now are working on the first steps to design guidelines. We have one group working on the character statement, which is basically going to be less than 1-page statement of what it is that we're trying to work towards, or preserve, however you want to think about it. Another group is reviewing existing guidelines, and we have some from the internet that I pulled together, but we've also got some from Emily that I just received this week. And another one that Gary, one of our architects contributed, that is from, it's also going to be very good. And then 2 other things, actually there's four efforts going on. One effort is to just come up with a list of all the elements that we might include in the guidelines. And, you know, some of this is simple, massing, windows, doors, but, you know, just sort of an inventory of the things you might want to keep in mind. And we're working on collecting a set of streetscapes, views, buildings that we can take as a sort of representative example of what it is that you think of when you think of the town. And to that end, I would invite anybody on the task force who's interested in contributing that to come up with your views. So it could be as you look down a particular street, or as you turn a corner, or whatever, because the character statement will be part of it, this will be part of it, and then the design guidelines will come up underneath that and will be, and there's numerous examples of them. That'll be really a statement as to what it is that we want to give developers some guidance on. So our next meeting is Tuesday. We're aware that time is short, and I think we got I think we're fortunate to have a really good crew of people. So
What time Tuesday?
6
o'clock.
30th?
Yes,
6 o'clock Tuesday,
the 30th.
the 30th.
Are the members of the
Is it in
design
Boston?
guideline committee posted on the website at this point? Yeah.
That is a very interesting question. As constituted right now, and I may need some guidance from our more experienced members. The committee is comprised of the members of the task force, and the architects are
Consulting.
consultants.
Advising.
Now, you know, for compliance purposes, I think this is a good way to work, and also makes just makes it, it's a good working relationship. They're working hard.
Right. As volunteers.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to know,
Well, I haven't told them the volunteers.
so if somebody wants to know who's kind of working on this, do they find out or not really?
They certainly can call into a meeting.
Sure.
No, is it on Zoom? No, it's not on Zoom.
It's not on Zoom, but it's on, all the meetings are posted, minutes and attendees are posted.
You wanna know who they are?
Yeah, we had somebody who said, who are these people?
So they are John Harden, who's an architect at Olson and Lewis.
Okay.
Chuck Winston.
Chuck
With-
Wisner, who's a retired architect, but does coaching now, but he's,
Okay.
let's see.
Gary Gilbert.
Gary Gilbert and who's one from the historical.
Paul.
And Paul, yeah, that's right.
So but those names are all posted on the minutes. On the town agenda site. So meetings and attendees and everything. Yeah. Paul Strempel and is from the Historic District Commission.
Before
I
we
think
move
the
on,
idea of having photographs and images is so helpful. It's such a good idea.
Yeah,
Have that be your
I thought it
fourth
was a good
task.
idea
It
too.
just,
So that's June 30th, January 30th,
yeah,
Yes.
6.
6 o'clock.
Can we make sure that we get copies of these maps electronically?
Yeah.
We're not getting anything from Emily electronically.
So.
We have those.
What?
We have those.
Electronically?
Yeah, the problem is they're big files, so you,
When did we receive them?
oh, geez. let's go.
I don't think everyone received. You two might have.
No, I think.
We don't get anything from Emily.
I didn't see anything.
No, we don't get any, I haven't gotten any
They're
electronic
actually
copies.
posted, these also, they're posted. But
I'm asking for an electronic copy
I will send you one. I will send everyone to make sure.
because
everyone-
Emily's only sending things to a small group of people and the rest of us are not receiving it.
Okay.
We received printout stuff.
Mhm.
But that's the only packet we've received.
Chris, do you have a sharing thing to get those big files across, because they won't email.
Yeah, yeah, we transfer or something, I'll do something like that.
I can do it if you want.
Oh, okay, why don't you do it? Sure, you can do it easily.
I'll just send them out via Dropbox.
Great,
That transfer thing, where's your thing?
okay, yeah, because it doesn't work at every one, does it? Okay, good, all right.
Thank you.
Minutes from the last meeting, oh, we have several, a bunch of minutes.
Mhm. Yep.
Anyone want to, make any comments on them?
fine to me.
I'll take a motion to approve them.
So moved.
So this is all three sets? We got a motion and a second, any discussion on them? All in favor?
I,
Sue says yes too, okay, unanimous. Public comment, anyone from the?
we didn't talk about the annual report.
Oh, I'm sorry, the annual report. So we have. I sent out a draft of annual report. Sandy had wanted to add a few things to it. Anyone have any comments on the annual report? I sort of was going with to keep it simple.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, is that okay if we send it out? Anyone? Sure. Okay. Now we can move on to public comment. Anyone from the public wish to speak?
Chris, I think I have another couple of questions.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
so design guideline subcommittee, why are they not Zooming? And my second question is, please explain to me, it doesn't need to be now, it can be later. Why are we not including more of the golf course? Thanks.
Why are we not including the golf course? I think it's an interesting idea. We can talk about it some more. As for Zooming, the subcommittee thought that it would be easier to work around a table and the Zooming would be more problematic than it was worth. But if they decide to do it via Zoom, we could do it.
It's an open meeting and people are welcome to come to town hall to participate in the meeting.
Yeah, that's
This
right.
is Gail, sorry.
They
I
don't have,
clarified that with town clerk.
they don't have to be Zoom, but if people would
So
prefer.
as a planning board member, I cannot, people have other things, so Zoom is a convenience and that is the standard. So specifically, I would like to know why they're not being Zoom. It seems like that's being very intentional, not Zooming. Thank you.
It's a subcommittee and prior to 2020, nothing was Zoomed. So
I think it's.
We're
all-
post 2020.
Christina,
I completely get it, but we're
I
post
I
20.
think it's also a bit of a problem because the kind of compressed schedule and to some extent alarms that Denny and Richard previously had, well, I mean, that we're all starting to feel that we're really under the gun means there are lots of meetings happening all the time.
So that's all the more reason to have them
Let me-
recorded so people can look at them at
Let
later
me finish,
dates.
let me finish. And Gail.
These
has
just sound like
had a hard
excuses.
time-
Thank
Christina,
you.
Christina, please.
Gail has had a hard time scheduling all the meetings in the town hall. And
The
so there's been a little bit of a backlash about the MBTA task force taking up a lot of bandwidth and space. And so
May I add that one, there are not that many Zoom platforms, and two, the subcommittee meetings are not recorded and saved on Zoom because there's just too much for town hall to manage. We're not hiding anything here.
Thank you, Gail. Any other discussion? Any other public comment? Hearing none. Anyone have any other administrative matters that have not been?
I do.
Yes.
Sorry, I know everyone wants to go home, but you know that I'm always looking for a way to make our requirements smaller. And I've been thinking recently about the governor's new initiative, the Resilient Coast Initiative, and I don't know if people have been following her press on this, but there is the Resilient Coast communities, 78 towns, and there's an overlap of 41 between the Resilient Coast communities and the MBTA communities. And it's towns similar to us, Cohasset, Marblehead, etc. So I would like to pursue a tangent with doing a little research about how we got our first reduction in the number of units and acreage to try to get a further reduction based on the recent flooding. It's all covered in the Resilient Coast Initiative. They're just putting together their leadership team, but I would like permission from the task force to pursue this as a way to hopefully get a further reduction. It's always easier if you can say, it doesn't have to apply to just Manchester. Look at these 44 or 41 communities that are covered by both of these, the state initiative and the MBTA law.
Anybody object to her?
I had an informal discussion with a citizen on this subject who actually suggested exactly what Sue described, and I am 100% in favor.
Yeah.
I'd like to move that we give her
I have one
leave
comment.
to do that.
I
Go
have
ahead.
one comment. I mean, I think it's a great idea, but let's just remember that we may find ourselves eating into some of the territory we've already selected.
Well, I think the idea is maybe we lower our requirements.
I understand, but that lowering is going to be specific lowering. It's not going to be a I'm guessing. that it
I
would
don't
be
think it will be. No.
a specifically selected area in town. And it might not be the areas you think it is.
Sue, you have a response for that?
So my goal is not to make it specific. It's the fact that we suffer from this and we're under this new initiative, which applies to planning and building and all of the things that we're wrestling with right now, is a good way for the state to say, okay, fewer acres for you, fewer units. You've got a smaller land mass that you really have to contend with. If we end up including areas that are prone to flooding in our requested districts, if we can make them smaller, it's better, in my opinion.
Well, it certainly would be good to get them smaller.
Okay, so
They go
And all
for
they can do is say no.
do I have a motion? Do I hear a second on the motion?
second.
All in favor of authorizing Sue to pursue this tangent?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Looks like it's unanimous, so
for
we
it.
go for it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
She left her maps.
You can take the maps. I'll be going.
Ah, Sarah, you're a happy girl. You have to wait for the drop. People sending us the slides for this.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
Can I just take some pictures of them?
Oh, sure.